So today, as Elisa said, we're going to be talking about tips to overcome the impacts of tariffs on your business. And so this has been a relatively new phenomenon that kind of hit us out of nowhere. And so I'm going to speak to it from a business perspective in business speak for small business. So my company, Business Basics, the core of what I do is I provide common sense advice for uncommon entrepreneurs. And so we focus on the who, when, where, why, and how solutions to do what it is that you need to do for your business. So today's session is going to be very practical, giving you practical examples and things that you can to protect you, or things that you need to look for as you're moving forward and growing your own business. So when we're talking about today's agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about the current business climate, the impacts of tariffs and it changing economics for small business. I'm going to review opportunities available to you. So I always say tariffs or changes in what's going on aren't necessarily always bad. There can be some really great things that come out of them. And at the end, I'm going to provide you with a list of some resources that you may want to do further exploration of. So right now, when we look at the current business climate for all of you, okay, we are all as entrepreneurs, we were just trying to survive a post-COVID world. Okay, and that was challenging enough coming out of COVID and trying to get into recovery from that. And then all of a sudden now to be hit into these new unknowns. Okay, so, in that post-COVID world, we had supply chain issues. Getting products that we needed was really, really difficult. And that was starting to ease off. And then as a result of all of that, we started to face some rising costs. Increased competition. And the reason I'm going to say this is because during COVID, when a lot of people were shut down, we ended up getting a lot of people starting their own businesses. We started seeing more side hustles. So while we may not see a lot more brick and mortar competition, we did start seeing competition in other areas. Okay. Let's talk about a changing political landscape. Who would have thought that both provincially and federally, we would have been heading into elections? Who would have thought that what goes on in the world, how it can impact us as greatly as it has? And so this has become a really good and insulating way for us to look at and say, what happens in the rest of the world does really impact us that we really haven't seen before. The threat of tariffs and the ever ongoing threat of tariffs, that they're here, that they're not here, that this person's doing it, that person isn't. And then the final one that comes with all of this uncertainty is the inflation and interest rates. And so I really do enjoy the quote that I've included here, that small business isn't for the faint of heart. It's for the brave, the patient, and the persistent. It's for the overcomer. And that's what we're going to focus on today. How do we overcome what could potentially be something that is negative for our business? So some of the things that we learned in a post-COVID world, okay, 62% of Canadian small businesses reported that they were not prepared for the economic impact of COVID-19. Not a surprise there. It hit all of us out of the blue, but people were not prepared for it. 88% of Canadian small to medium enterprises have less than 3 months of cash reserves. And so this makes all of us in business very vulnerable to any type of an economic shock. So if our prices increase, what we thought we had in reserve or available to us is now dwindling. More than 1/3 of small business in Canada are not optimistic about their future. And this is reflected in their concerns about economic stability. And finally, small and medium-sized enterprises, though, they contribute over 1/2 of Canada's GDP, gross domestic product. And so therefore, while everybody's kind of focusing on large industries, it's the small to medium-sized businesses that really do have an impact on the Canadian economy. And sometimes we're not given the credit that is due to all of us as small business owners for that. The Chinese proverb that I use here, and people are going like, oh my God, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time. So as entrepreneurs, we can't be worried about, what's happening now and hiding from it. We need to move forward. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. So let's look at how do tariffs affect Canadian businesses. And so I took this from Royal Bank Money Matters, okay? And it talks about that potential US tariffs and Canadian surtaxes will increase the cost for Canadian businesses, disrupt supply chains, and reduce profit margins, all of which could transform the Canadian economy and impede economic growth. In the short term, very much so. In the long term, we're going to do things to try to minimize that. And so, when we talk about the concept of tariffs, the way that it works is as goods enter a country, they're classified by customs. Some goods already have a government mandated tariff added to the cost that you as a buyer or supplier must pay, a sales tax, before the goods are released at the point of entry. So if you're buying inventory, seeking parts, making your product, and you're bringing it into the country, you already may understand that you may have a tariff already attached. But the impact of these new tariffs on the Canadian economy and Canadian businesses will depend largely on how long the tariffs remain in place and what, if any, escalation occurs as the result of counter tariffs. So we kind of already started seeing this. And so when we look at traditionally just a US tariff flowing through the Canadian economy, we look at the very first thing that happened to all of us was uncertainty and shock. It's like, oh my God, we've got a Canada, US, Mexico free trade agreement. Now all of a sudden that was thrown out the door. And so what happened to a lot of businesses is that they started to front load their inventory, started buying, trying to get things into the country before the official tariffs hit. And then we saw prices rise, in some cases demand drop, as people are trying to figure out, what this could mean for them as a supplier and as a buyer. And then we got into retaliatory measures. Second industry started to be impacted. Okay. And we're seeing a lot of that where there are plants that are going on shutdowns for a number of weeks, a number of months. We had the Bank of Canada response that the Bank of Canada had sort of leveled off where we were on our interest rates. And then we've got fiscal policy that's attempting to support. So we have started to see the federal and provincial governments trying very slowly to figure out what are some of the ways that they can implement some changes or some policies to impact small businesses. And right now we've seen things like, reduction in WSIB premiums, changing some of the, reporting structures and all of that. It's mainly right now been in what is already going on and in place at both the provincial and federal levels. We haven't seen a lot of additional grant or funding programs as of yet, but we're still kind of waiting. We're waiting to see what this impact is. So why does this become important to you? And so when we're talking about you as business owners, and I'm going to kind of talk about some of the things that you guys already know, but that are kind of impacted in all of this. So we look at some of the regulations that you are governed under, the rules, the regulations, permit licenses, or inspections that are required by your industry, local government, or federal and provincial governments. And so you may see some changes to regulations that you as a business owner, it's your responsibility to keep up to date with where the changes may be happening and make sure that you are compliant with these new rules and regulations. It could also affect some of your own processes, your operational and production processes. And it could have the places that you make and sell your products and services and the suppliers that you are currently using. And then the other thing is the location. Can you make your products and services in the locations that you have chosen? And where and how can you sell them? And what new opportunities may exist? So remember that I said for everything that looks like it's bad, there could also be something that's good because it could open up new markets for you. Now, when we look at this, we also look at, the business locations that you are operating in. And so depending on the type of business location that you currently have, the rules may change, things may ease up a little bit, there may be more regulations. So, for those of you that are home-based businesses or working out of a shared or commercial office, there may not be a lot that changes for you in your use of the location that you have right now. This could also happen. Now, we could see a change if you were an e-commerce business or an online business. you may need to now start looking at opening up the border that you are willing to sell to. It could require you to do currency conversions, okay? Reaching out to new markets. If you are a brick or mortar or Main Street business, this is really going to depend on what is going to be the economic development change in your community. There could be changes to the amount of tax that you pay. There could be some incentives for business owners that are available through your local community. This could also impact things like temporary premises, such as market stalls or pop-up markets, things like that, pop-up businesses, okay? There may be some changes to the rules to make it more flexible for people to participate in those markets. And so again, as a business owner, you need to be aware of, based on how you run your business and where you run your business, what could be some things that might be available to you. So now, one of the first things that I talk about when any business enters into economic instability or uncertainty, okay, for some reason, the very first thing that people tend to do is look at a way to, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, I need to lay off people. I need to fire people. I need to minimize my workforce. And realistically, this is probably one of the worst things that you can do when you are facing economic uncertainty. And the reason that this is so important is because employees are the keepers of your knowledge. They are the ones that help you keep your business growing. And in a lot of cases, they are your greatest asset. And the reason is because of their adaptability and innovation. Okay. Your employees frequently contribute fresh ideas and solutions, okay, to your business. And so they may be a really great resource for you to shoulder tap them to look for new ways to reduce costs, enhance your efficiency, or look at new ways of adapting your business model. Your employees are also the keepers of your customer relationships. Okay, they are the representatives of your business and they are vital in maintaining customer relationships. And so keeping loyal customers is the most important thing that you can do right now. And so if you take away the person that your loyal customers have had the relationship with, you sort of damage that loyal customer base. The third thing is operational continuity. Experienced employees ensure smooth business operations, okay, even under challenging conditions, okay? And so you want their expertise because, and I'm going to talk about it in cost management, but retraining someone or training a new employee when things start to get better takes a lot more time, effort, and money than it does to kind of keep someone with you throughout this little bit of a fluctuation. Morale and culture. A dedicated workforce creates a positive work environment, boosting morale and productivity. Okay. When you have people who want to work with you to better the business, okay, they are going to keep things going. You become a team. Okay. And you work together. And the final one is cost management. And I kind of alluded to it already, but while layoffs may seem to be an immediate cost-cutting measure, they can result in long-term losses. And so, as I said before, hiring, retraining, training new employees are much more, they cost much more. It costs almost 5 times more to get a new employee on side than it does to keep an old employee, okay, or an older employee. And so this is very important. Now, with employees comes the sort of caveat about your suppliers. Now, this is where you may need to start looking and making some changes, okay? Because, we need to look at who do you buy from, where are they located, how do you get your supplies from them, and do you have a backup? Now, this is one of the most interesting things that have come out of this whole tariff discussion in Canada. It was more difficult to purchase something from BC than it is to purchase something from China. And this is a very scary reality. And so as a Canadian economy, we really do need to look at opening up our existing internal borders for finding ways that we can work together. So this may be a great opportunity right now for you to diversify your supply chain. And so looking for suppliers from different countries, or regions or provinces that are unaffected by the tariffs, okay, to reduce reliance on a single source and mitigate your risks. In a lot of cases, and I mean, I'm guilty of this as well, you always go to the thing that you know. It's like, this is the way I've always done it. This is the person I've always used. And so we kind of do it out of convenience, expediency, okay, comfort. And this may be the point that we need to start getting out of our comfort zones a little bit. Second thing we can do is utilize technology. So we need to employ supply chain management software to identify and evaluate potential new suppliers based on cost, reliability, and lead times. So do remember, if you are thinking about looking at other overseas suppliers, you have to remember that it's not only you placing the order, but it's how long does it take for them to produce your order and then ship it to you. So you have to start looking at how does that work with your need for certain products. This could be the time that we start negotiating with existing suppliers, okay? Looking at things like cost sharing, price adjustments, or extended payment terms to manage these additional costs. Because you have to remember, your suppliers are being faced with the same things that you as business owners are. And so there might be a way that you can work together to be able to mitigate this. Local sourcing is a really, really big one right now. And we've always talked about, like, buy local. But there may be an advantage for you. Like before, we would say, oh, the local person charges me much more than this international person or this person from the US. But that not having to pay a tariff, reducing your shipping costs and reducing your lead time may end up being more beneficial to you in the long run. Okay, paying a little bit more compared to what you could be paying and building those relationships could be really important. Now, I'm also a really big believer that this is a time that you really need to be collaborating with your industry networks. So join your industry association, share information, read what they've got going on, and find other businesses that are similar to yours that are facing the same challenge, and share suppliers and things like that. I'm going to list it at the end, but Canadian Federation of Independent Business is a really big advocate for small business, and they will post on their site, cfib.ca. They will post what they are doing with the governments, what's going on, for all of you. You want to assess your supplier stability as well. Okay. So if you are worried about your business being damaged, you also have to worry about what could be the impact on the suppliers that you are relying on. And so really make sure that they are financially stable, that they can meet your quality and delivery standards. Do your due diligence. Okay. If you are not hearing back from your suppliers or trying to seek new suppliers and not hearing back from you, look at the red flags and make sure that you've identified those red flags. And you want to build strong relationships with multiple suppliers to provide you flexibility and options if one supplier cannot meet your needs. Now, customers. Who are your customers? Are you reaching the right target market? And are you focused on the traction of new customers or retention of existing customers? Where are they and how did they hear about you? And so remember, I talked a lot about, like, where you were selling and how you were selling. There is a difference. If you have a brick and mortar, your main concern is making sure that you get feet through the door, boots on the pavement through your front door. If you're an online business, then it's like, where are you finding these customers? And if you're a combination of those two types of business, you may need to look at who is the right target market for what you're doing. And the reason that I really talk about the difference between retention, which talks about building relationships with your loyal existing customers, and attraction, which is about finding new customers, I'm going to share some stats with you, and you're going to see why I'm a really big believer in retention. Okay. So 65% of a company's business comes from previous customers. A 5% boost in your customer retention can increase your profits by 25 to 95%, okay? Because existing customers are 50% more likely to try new products and spend 31% more than new customers. And So the biggest thing about this, about retaining and having a loyal customer base, 91% of consumers are more likely to shop from brands who they recognize, remember, and who provide them with relevant offers and recommendations based on their needs. The more you know the customers who are coming in on a regular basis, the more that you engage with them. This is why maintaining your employees who are building these relationships with you become really important. Now, we talk about attraction. Acquiring new customers costs 5 times as much, costs you in terms of advertising, marketing, putting things out there, 5 times as much as retaining existing customers. Okay. Now, on the attraction side, 73% of consumers use more than one buying channel on their shopping journey. So now you have to be where these new customers are, which could increase your marketing dollars. Okay, because now all of a sudden it's not just digital marketing, it's about sharing information with them. It could be sharing with it on multiple platforms that you've never done before. And the reason for this is because 65% of new buyers research products online before going to a physical store. So if you have a brick and mortar, people want to do the research first before they walk in your door. And this is going to increase your marketing, increase the information that you've got out there. Okay. And this is the really, really sad part. If all you're doing is attracting new customers all the time and you're not building loyalty, 77% of brands could disappear overnight and no one would even care. Who would have ever thought that the Hudson's Bay Company, that's been around since the beginning of Canada, okay, would now be in a situation that all of its stores have closed? If Hudson's Bay is in that kind of a situation, okay, and it was a known brand, okay, and people are kind of going, hey, I'll just buy from someplace else, okay, you can see that customers are not, rising up in arms going, oh my God, we need to save Hudson's Bay. They've already identified there are other places they can buy, okay? So products and services. Are the products and services that you are offering in keeping with the needs of your customers? Do they solve a problem for your customers? How do you source them? How do you make them? And how are you pricing them? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the 2 different types of business owners that we have. So makers are creators. They design, build, or craft original products or solutions from scratch. And so if you are a maker, you're generally the creative, innovative, problem solving. You are the original creator of a product or a service. Okay, the advantages of being a maker is that you have control over your product quality. Okay, you can customize to the specific market need or customer preferences. You can build your brand and build brand ownership. Okay, so you're establishing your own brand identity. Because of this, you can reach higher profit margins by cutting out the middleman, but it can cost you a lot more in the beginning. And innovation, direct involvement in the production process allows makers to innovate and improve their products continuously. You can get feedback from your customers, make some changes if you are the one that is creating something. Okay, and this can be as simple as creating a cupcake to creating art to creating, a larger scale. It doesn't always need to be large scale. It can be those small individual items. On the disadvantage side, okay, there is a high initial investment, setting up the manufacturing facilities, acquiring new raw materials, okay? It does require complex operations because as a maker, you're responsible not only for your what it is that you do, but you're also responsible for the whole business end of it. And so production, inventory, logistics. As a maker, you are also governed by regulatory compliance, okay? So there are various regulations and standards which can be time consuming and costly, but you need to be aware of any changes because you are the manufacturer of that product. And so, there's a risk exposure. And some of you who are makers will understand this, that you bear the full risk of unsold inventory, production issues, and market fluctuations. And being a maker, it's time consuming, okay? Because not only do you have to worry about running your business and selling and all of that, but you're also worried about designing, prototyping, and manufacturing new products. And that can take up a lot of time. Now, on the flip side, we have what we call resellers. And we call these middlemen. Okay, so please don't be insulted by this, but what you do is you resell products that you have purchased from other manufacturers or distributors. And then you sell them to the end customer for a profit. And so you act as an intermediary distributing and selling existing products. And this is a very fundamental way of doing business. Okay. Now, advantages of this, there are lower initial investment, because you don't need to set up manufacturing facilities. You don't need to, bring in the prototyping and all of that. It offers you a little bit of flexibility because you can offer a wide range of products from different manufacturers without the need for production. You can be quick to market. So the minute you have something that you can sell, you can put it up right away. Okay. And you can adapt to market trends and changes by sourcing new products from various suppliers. Simplified operations, because you are simply focused on sales, marketing, and customer service. And then, the business end of the business. And the reduced risk is because any type of manufacturer defects or supply chain disruptions, they go back to the manufacturer. So if there's something wrong with the product, it's the manufacturer that is responsible. But on the flip side, you have lower profit margins, okay, because you've had to buy wholesale. You only have a little bit of money to add on to make your retail. And so your profit margins may be a little bit lower. You also have limited control over product quality. So you are relying on the manufacturer for product quality and consistency. The reason that this now becomes important, guys, as we're looking at finding new suppliers, these are the things that you really do need to be focused on. You also have brand dependence. Okay, so you are relying on the reputation and brand strength of the manufacturers that you are working with. Inventory management can be a problem, because you may have decided to buy a whole bunch of stuff to get a better deal. And please don't ever buy in bulk. This can be a real problem. Okay, that if you don't know that people are going to buy it, having a whole bunch of stuff sitting on your shelf, inventory that's unsold, sits on your shelf and mocks you. And you may have market competition, because resellers may face intense competition from other retailers selling similar products. Okay, so if you are a reseller, one of the things that I would look for, okay, if you are looking at building supplier relationships, okay, please try to get exclusivity where you can. Exclusivity to a city, to a province, or a country. Okay, this can be really important, because it then makes you the sole seller of that item or that group of items, that other people then can't come in and sell the exact same thing from the exact same supplier. Now, I love this graphic here, because back in the day, it used to be all about shop local, and it's not about buying local, just buying local anymore. It's now regional, provincial, national, and international. And now we have to focus our lens not just on people coming to our stores and our locations, but now we have to look at the whole supply chain, the whole chain of events that happen. And so some of the things, and I know you guys are going to have this section, I'm just going to briefly hit what some of the definitions are right now. And I know there's going to be a session about it coming up through the library. But made in Canada, it is a label that is applied to items where the last substantial transformation of the product occurred in Canada. So at least 51% of the production or manufacturing cost must have been in Canada. Okay. And you must say whether the product is made in Canada from imported components or ingredients, or a combination of imported and domestic parts or ingredients. So where you see a made in Canada label, you will generally see another label underneath, or a notation underneath, that says where the ingredients may have come from, if different countries. Produced in Canada, or product in Canada, denotes that all or nearly all of the food processing and labor used to make the product is Canadian. Okay. And so again, when we're talking about, foods raised by Canadian farmers and prepared and packaged, but they can contain a small amount of imported. Okay. Now, produced in Canada, they can only be used on items when at least 98% of the costs of producing or manufacturing of the goods have occurred in Canada. So made in Canada has a lesser threshold than produced in Canada does. Canadian. The CFA treats the Canadian Food Inspection Agency treats the word Canadian as same as productive in Canada. And if you use it, you have to make sure that it meets the Product of Canada standards. Okay. And so this becomes really important. Again, Canadian, that's the way that it is interpreted by the Licensing Bureau. 100% Canadian means that it must be entirely Canadian, including its processing and labor and ingredients. Okay, so everything must be Canadian. Now, the final one, and the one that we see the most of right now, and that you see loads of in my diagram here, is a maple leaf. A maple leaf on food packaging or any type of packaging does not mean that a product is wholly or partially Canadian. Okay, so you have to be really careful. And even as a consumer, we have to be really careful that we don't get caught up in the, oh my God, it's got a maple leaf on it, therefore it must be wholly Canadian. So realistically, really watch the use of the maple leaf, make sure there is descriptives underneath. Use one of the other terms when you're talking about, the products that you have. Use one of the other stronger terms, have a maple leaf with it, but then the 100% Canadian or made in Canada or produced in Canada with it as a combination, to be very clear about what your intent is. And so why is this important? Okay, with the US tariff threat, this spurned new interest in buying Canadian. And so this is a really big wake-up call that we need to diversify our own economy. Okay. But what was interesting in the last surveys, okay, 90%, 96% of international consumers had a favorable view of Canada. And the awareness of Canadian products is strong abroad, especially among younger groups. But the lack of availability makes it difficult for overseas consumers to choose Canadian brands. This is really important for us to think about when we look at where is it and how is it that we are advertising what it is that we sell. So what are some of the things that we can do right now in our stores, on our websites, on our social media? Adding maple leaves to Canadian maple leaf products, stating that you're a Canadian-owned company, okay? Going out and saying you're Canadian-owned, putting a little Canadian flag someplace really does make a difference now. The same way that it used to be when you went traveling, you put your Canadian flag on, it meant something, it means even more now. As an entrepreneur, it really is important that you not only expect people to buy from you, but that you also buy Canadian and support Canadian, okay, as much as you can, because then you are getting into that 100% Canadian. Some of the other interesting things, okay, people having Canadian flags positioned on their store windows, okay? This sense of national pride, we have never, ever, and I'm old, we have never had this sense of national pride, even in 1967, during this centennial, okay? And this is really, really important that we really get involved in it, okay? Now, the other side of this, and again, you can debate this, and I'm not going to debate it, but you can, and people have been doing it, canceling orders of US items and exchanging those purchases with similar items made in Canada. Okay, I'm not about busting up relationships that you have with people, but we really do have to look at what are going to be the long-term impacts. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in one of the other slides. Add buy Canadian or made in Canada to your website. So or buy Canadian to a section in your store, make it easy for people to find the stuff that they know intrinsically, that when they're looking at it, they know they don't have to go looking for it. Because if you're making me look for it, I'll go someplace else where someone is much more clear about this. If I am someone who has decided as a consumer to really get into the buy Canadian. Now, the idea is that if you are doing trade international or with the US, it is really important right now that if you do not have a customs broker, that you do find yourself a customs broker, okay? Now, they play a crucial role during tariff wars by helping businesses navigate the complexities of international trade regulations, okay? So when tariffs fluctuate or new trade barriers emerge, they will help you avoid costly delays, ensure compliance, and optimize your supply chain strategy. And the reason is because they have the expertise on how classifications, tariff classifications are done, duty reductions and trade agreements. And so they will really help you with trying to make sure that you are labeling your products, that you've got it done the right way, that if it's going to another country, that there's not going to be any additional duties and tariffs added on. They will also identify for you alternate sourcing options, and they can help you with licensing and documentation requirements. So I am a really big believer in that if you are going to expand your international markets, if you're looking at suppliers, find a customs broker who has an office in Canada and one that also has an office in the country that you are looking. So therefore, it's the same company talking to itself from two different countries, okay? This is very important. So when you are choosing a customs broker, please check their licensing, ensure that they are certified and have experience with US, international, and Canadian customs. Find someone who has industry experience of your specific industry and goods. Technology and efficiency, find those that have digital tracking and automated filling. Reputations and review, figure out their track record, client feedback and success rate. And cost and transparency, ensure there are no hidden charges, okay? Now, the reason that I say this right now, because if you are sending stuff to the US, okay, the US has made an $800 limit, okay, to go through customs. If your packages that you are shipping to your customers get stopped in customs, okay, on the US side, it could take an extra 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years for it to go through if you are just sending it regular mail. This is the reason that you have a customs broker. They facilitate the transition. Why is this important to you as a small business owner? Because if that package gets lost, you have now lost the goods. You're going to have to refund the customer, and you are now out twice. So depending on your dollar values, this and what's going to happen is it's your reputation that's going to be damaged. Okay, so this is really important to take into consideration. I'm going to talk now about some of the ways that you can mitigate and get into risk management. Okay, risk management isn't about being very prudent, careful. It's about eliminating risk of ruin so that you can aggressively take non-ruin risk. This is the reason I put the customs broker in there first. Okay, because if I'm going to show you right now the financial impacts of tariffs, if you guys haven't already seen this. So if we look at the pre-tariff costs for a cotton t-shirt in US dollars, okay, we would have paid, coming from the US, we would have paid $10. There would have been an exchange rate of $1.44 and change. So the unit price in Canadian would have been about $14.45. There were no duties and no tariffs on cotton t-shirts, cotton goods under the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement. Brokerage fees, if you had a broker, shipping, insurance, other fees, your landed cost would have been about $16.45. And so your suggested retail, you probably would have gone with about $25 for a shirt that cost you $16, okay, Canadian. If we were ordering it from China pre-tariff, okay, there would have been a duty associated with this of 18%. And so it would have increased our cost to a landed cost of $19.05, which would have meant that we probably would have retailed that shirt at $29 pre-tariff. Canada, US, Mexico free trade agreement. With the free trade agreement gone in post-tariff, this $10 cotton t-shirt now has a 25% tariff on it. Okay. This now made our $16.45 landed cost t-shirt cost us $20.06, which means that we would now have to retail it based on the same parameters for $30. We've now increased the cost of the same product by $5. Okay. If they decide to eliminate the Canada-US free trade agreement, we also will then have 25% tariff on, or sorry, duty on this on top of the tariff, which would mean that the landed cost would be $23.68, which means that we need to retail this for $36. Our China costs have not changed. It is still $19.05 and we can retail it for $29. And so this is some of the work that you need to start thinking about depending on what it is and where it is that you are buying from. And so how can these changes impact your business, your customers, your distribution channels, your suppliers, advertising, promotion, and timing? Okay, this is what the reality is. This is what people are being faced with right now. And you're probably just starting to see the impacts of this now. Okay, so what do you need to do as an entrepreneur at this point in time in your business? You need to assess your current situation. Review all of your relevant documentation, your operations manuals, your production process, inventory usage levels, your financial and business records. Figure out where you are right now and what might need to change. So when you're doing this review, determine your areas of concern. Are the issues that you are facing being faced by everyone in your industry? Are they being faced by other businesses in your community, or specific only to your business and your operations? As part of this review, you also need to start looking at interviewing partners and stakeholders. Okay, interview the people directly involved in the situation: employees, customers, competitors, or other local business owners. So if you have the ability to network with your other business owners, please do so. Okay. Working together and coming up with common solutions may be very beneficial at this point in time. And the final thing is review your findings. Okay. And look to discuss solutions, not problems. Okay. We can sit there and bitch and complain about all the things that are going wrong, but only the entrepreneur that can find the solution will survive. The entrepreneur that's only going to sit there and blame everybody is not going to survive this. That's the reality. Okay. So the one thing I'm going to say is that the immediate response is not always the right response. We go into panic mode. And as I talked about before, when owners think something happens, sometimes they have immense pressure to make, they put immense pressure on themselves to make swift decisions. And while some choices can help weather the storm, others may inadvertently harm the long-term prospects of your company. So I've already mentioned a couple of these. Okay, employees. Your employees are more than mere executors of your vision. They are the lifeblood of your organization, and their expertise propels your processes, shapes your products, and fuels your productivity. So if you're getting rid of them, you've now lost a resource that you no longer have. The other thing that you need to understand is that loyalty is a virtue. Okay. Businesses in a recession shouldn't exclusively focus on customer attraction. Instead, you need to start working harder towards building and maintaining customer loyalty. Okay. Over 39%, I love my statistics, okay, are willing to spend more with the brand they're loyal to, even if there are cheaper options elsewhere. It's about the relationship. People will pay more for that relationship to know that you are there for them and to support you. Okay. If you have built the whole concept of customer loyalty and retention. And if you don't have this built in now, this is what you really do need to be focusing on. How do you build this? Create mailing lists, have discussions, try to make sure that you know who these people are, what problem you are solving for them, and anticipate what their needs are. Okay, work smarter, not harder. If your company cannot streamline its processes, there could be numerous repercussions: inefficiencies, miscommunication, greater scope for errors, or poor governance. Okay, you need to do the due diligence to make sure that all the pieces are working together, because what happens sometimes when we react quickly, we only focus on one area of our business and make changes there and forget how that one area of the business affects all the other parts of our business. And so please make sure that you're looking big picture of how everything integrates and works together, and not just focused on, oh my God, I'm just going to, change suppliers, I'm just going to raise my prices, without looking at how that impacts everything else. And the other one is self-care. Please remember yourself in the process. Okay. In tough economic times, this is not the time for you to start paying yourself or working hours that are unsustainable. Okay. And I'm just going to leave you with what would happen to your business if you weren't able to be there. So again, this is a lot on your plate as an entrepreneur. You got to try to deal with all these outside things. You're responsible for employees. You're trying to make sure your customers are taken care of, but you also have to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Okay. Because if you don't, and if you crash and burn, it will take you longer to bring yourself up than if you would have had balance all along. So when we talk about core functions of your business, okay, I'm talking about your policies and processes, your human resources, reviewing with your competitors. And please remember that competitors are not people that you want to kill and get rid of. Okay. Competitors can also be your greatest source of referral. They can be people that you can work together with and try to do things. And I use the example sometimes of restaurants. There are restaurants that are open for breakfast and lunch. There are other ones that are only open for dinner. You look at how you can all work together trying to get those restaurant dollars. We look at our customers, our marketing and sales, our finances, productions, operations, the products and services that we sell, and the resources that we have available to us. So this is probably one of the best grids that I ever found. And I thought it was so simple and so easy. But if you're ever trying to figure out your strategic goal, I love using this very, very simple thing. And it talks about, do you have it and do you want it? And so if you don't have it and you don't want it, you avoid doing it. It's as simple as that. If you don't have it, but you want it, okay, then you try to achieve that. If you have it, but you don't want it, you get rid of it. And if you have it and you want it, then you try to make sure that you preserve it. And so when you're going through your core functions, this is just a really, really quick way for you to figure out what is it that you really need or don't need, and what is the direction that you need to take. Not everything needs, like I say, don't be a bass, not and a bass as in fish, because bass is a fish chase after shiny things. Okay. This is not the time for you to be chasing after shiny and new. It really is the time for you to identify what is a need for you in your business and what is a want. So also the time for you, when we're talking about financials, to review your cash flow. And cash flow review refers to the movement of money in and out of your business over a specific period of time. Okay. How you generate money and how you spend it. Okay. So cash inflows include customer payments, loans, asset sales. Cash outflows, paying your suppliers, buying inventory, repaying debts. You may have to go back in and look at, are there any changes that you need to make, based on what you had identified in the beginning and what we may need to look at for the future. And so with this, you need to be updating your cash flow forecasts. So keep your predictions up to date. You need to optimize your account receivable, which means improve how you collect money from your customers. If you gave them 30, 60, 90 days, you may need to make them pay, as they receive, okay, or shorten that time. From an accounts payable side, you need to manage your accounts payable. So plan how you pay your bills. Control your operating expenses. Keep your daily costs in check. Do you really need that at this point in time? Maintain adequate cash reserves. Ensure that you have enough cash saved. And so if there is a purchase that right now isn't required, make sure you set that money aside, that you don't spend it on something else. Set it aside. Monitor your inventory levels. So keep an eye on your stock and how much time may be required to replenish that stock. And with that comes the concept of anticipating seasonality. How do you prepare for seasonal changes? We kind of missed the one season. Christmas was the threat of tariffs. We really didn't get hit with it. Now we're going to be heading into some of the other, seasonal. We're already talking about summer. We're talking about Christmas, talking about the holidays, depending on your business. This is also the time that I say that you really should do a break-even analysis for your business. Okay. And this is a financial metric that you can do, and it provides companies with targets to cover costs and make a profit. Okay. And what a break-even analysis does, it determines the number of units that you need to sell to avoid losses. And so what it looks like, it's like, what are the operating costs of the business? What are the cost of goods? And what's the sale price of the items that you are selling? Okay. And it will tell you how many units you need to sell in order to make sure that all of your costs are covered, that you've paid for all of your inventory, and that you can still make money at your business. Okay. And so doing this will help you make better production and sales decisions when you know the margin and safety for a particular product or service, that you only need to sell X number of units in order to make sure all of your costs are covered. Okay. This is a really good time for you, because what happens is when we get into a state of, oh my God, we're thinking that we need to sell hundreds of thousands and millions of units, and we may actually not need to do that much. Okay, so this is a really great way for you to get a really good idea of what does it mean that you need to sell in order to make sure that all of your costs are covered. So some of the things that you can do, okay, loyalty programs. If you don't currently have one, is there a loyalty program you can introduce for your regular customers? One of the ways the other thing we talk about is communicating your value. Review your marketing materials and messaging. Are you clearly showing the value of your product offering, highlighting the benefits and features of buying from you versus somebody else? I'm always going to say be honest. Craft your marketing to focus on your commitment to value, quality, and your uncompromising standards. But be honest in what you're telling me. Please don't tell me you're the best. I'm the best pizza joint in this country. Okay, if you don't have something to back it up. If you got something to back it up, then you can say it. Another one that you may want to think of is the concept of bundling. So if you do have a lot of inventory that's not selling, as opposed to reducing that inventory and putting it on a 50% off rack, look if there's ways that you can bundle the inventory that isn't moving with other items that are moving. And so when you put things together and show increased value to your customers, you end up making a lot more money than just having one item that you're discounting totally. Offering alternatives to what you currently have. Could you offer different sizes or quantities, different price points that you may not have thought of before? So if your item is selling for $10, if you put it in a smaller container and sold it for $8, would that help your customers? Offering alternatives, could you add something new to your product lineup? We're going to say don't bait and switch. And we talk a lot about this, and we talk about the concept of shrinkflation. Okay, your bag of potato chips used to be this many ounces, now it's this many ounces. So don't try changing sizes or ingredients, hoping that people won't notice. Okay, where all of a sudden the current thing that you were selling for $10, you're going to sell it for $10, but it's going to be a lot smaller, and you're going to go, oh, no, it's the same product. Please don't do that. And the final thing on this is don't state the obvious. People are already aware of the rising cost of groceries, inflation, interest rates. Don't treat everything as being unique to you and you're the only one dealing with it. There is a reality that costs have increased, and that's a great statement. All of our costs have increased. We've had to do our price, but don't make this a poor me and you're the only one that's experiencing it, because if you as an entrepreneur experiencing it, your customer is also experiencing it. And just be realistic about it. If you have to increase it, it's people will understand if you are honest about it, but don't make it all about you, make it about them. Other realities, just again, stats wise, 50% of consumers say they would stay loyal to a brand that offers loyalty or reward programs. 89% of customers say they would stay loyal to a brand that shares their values. 94% would stay loyal to a brand that offers complete transparency. And customers are more likely to stay loyal to a brand if the price increase is explained and justified. So, I'm going to give you, here's some of the resources that you may want to, and I, when you get this copy, you can always, when you get the recording of this, go back and look at these. But these are different sites that will have a number of resources for you. There's a Startup Canada Tariff Toolkit, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Federal Government, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Export Development Canada, Canada Border Services Agency, Competition Bureau Canada, Trade Commission Services, Canadian Commercial Corporation, or your Small Business Enterprise Center, Local Business Improvement Area, Community Futures Office, the library, okay, will have access to all of these resources. And this, my friends, is the end of this presentation. I'm hoping that in the time that we had, that I was able to share with you some really important notes. And I'm hoping that now I'm going to stop sharing. And I believe that we will stop recording this at this point in time to answer some questions.